December 10th, 2008. A wealthy investor in New York receives a phone call. It's his financial advisor, Bernie Madoff, a man he's known for 25 years, a man he trusts with his entire life savings. Bernie's voice is shaking. "I need to tell you something. The returns I've been giving you, they're not real. There is no money. It's all gone." The investor is confused. "What do you mean, gone?" "I mean it was all a lie, for 17 years, maybe longer. I don't even know anymore. How much is left?" Bernie pauses. "Nothing." There's nothing left. That investor lost $15 million, his entire retirement, his children's college funds, his life's work gone. And he wasn't alone. Over the next 48 hours, the world would discover that Bernie Madoff, respected Wall Street legend, former chairman of NASDAQ, philanthropist, had been running the largest Ponzi scheme in human history. $65 billion, stolen from friends, family, charities, and Holocaust survivors. For 17 years, nobody noticed. Not the SEC, not the banks, not the investors. Today, we go inside the mind of Bernie Madoff, a financial monster who lived two lives. This is his story. Bernie Madoff didn't start as a criminal. He started as a kid from Queens with big dreams. Born in 1938, Bernie grew up in a working-class Jewish family in New York. His parents struggled financially. His mother even tried running an investment firm. It failed and was shut down by regulators. Maybe that's where Bernie learned his first lesson. The system can be beaten. In 1960, at just 22 years old, Bernie started his own investment firm with $5,000 he'd saved from lifeguarding Bernard L. Madoff Investment Securities. And at first, it was legitimate. Bernie was a pioneer. He helped create the NASDAQ stock exchange. He served as chairman. He was respected, influential, trusted. By the 1980s, his firm was one of the top market makers on Wall Street. But somewhere along the way, something changed. Bernie Madoff's genius, or his greatest deception, was his ability to live a double life. On one hand, he ran a legitimate billion-dollar market-making business, respected on Wall Street. On the other, he orchestrated a fraudulent investment advisory business that promised steady returns to thousands of clients. He kept the Ponzi scheme entirely separate. The legitimate business ran smoothly on one floor. The fraudulent operations existed almost like a ghost company, records faked. Trades fabricated on an old IBM AS/400 computer system, all designed to convince regulators and investors that the returns were real. Every month, investors received statements showing their money invested in big-name companies: Morgan Stanley, PepsiCo, Pfizer, General Electric. But none of it was real. Not a single trade was ever executed. The statements were fiction, printed lies. And for 17 years, nobody noticed. Here's how a Ponzi scheme works. You promise investors huge returns, 10%, 12%, 15% per year. But you don't actually invest their money. Instead, when an investor wants to withdraw their funds, you pay them with money from new investors. As long as new money keeps coming in, the scheme works. The moment it stops, everything collapses. Bernie's version was brilliant because he didn't promise outrageous returns. He promised something better: consistency. While the stock market went up and down, Bernie's returns were steady. 10% to 12% every single year. No matter what happened, crashes, recessions, booms, Bernie's fund always made money. It was too good to be true, but people believed it. Why? Because Bernie had something most con artists don't: legitimacy. He was the former chairman of NASDAQ. He sat on SEC advisory committees. He testified before Congress about market regulation. He donated millions to charity. Steven Spielberg invested with Bernie. Kevin Bacon invested with Bernie. The owner of the New York Mets invested with Bernie. Elie Wiesel, Holocaust survivor and Nobel Peace Prize winner, invested his foundation's entire endowment with Bernie. $15 million gone. And Bernie didn't just target the rich. He targeted his own community: Jewish charities, synagogues, retirement funds. He went to country clubs and charity galas. He built relationships. He became friends with his victims. And when people asked how he generated such consistent returns, he'd give vague answers. It's a split-strike conversion strategy. If you didn't understand what that meant, you felt stupid for asking. And if you did understand, you realized he wasn't actually explaining anything. But nobody pushed back, because being in Bernie's fund was exclusive, prestigious. People begged to invest with him. He'd turn them away, making it seem even more desirable. It was the ultimate con. Make people feel lucky to give you their money. After his arrest, Bernie Madoff became famously silent with the press. But through 400 pages of handwritten letters and emails to journalist Jim Campbell, we see something chilling, a compulsive need to explain, to rationalize, to control his legacy. He wrote 6 to 7-page single-spaced letters to Campbell, a complete stranger trying to justify every action. But to his own son Andrew, he wrote just one sentence. "I'm so sorry, Dad. No love. No real emotion, just a perfunctory apology." This reveals something critical about Bernie's psychology. His ego and narcissism allowed him to live 2 lives simultaneously, one legitimate, one criminal, without facing the truth about himself. He compartmentalized everything: his legitimate business, his fraud, his family, his victims. Each existed in a separate mental box, never touching, never forcing him to confront the monster he'd become. Psychologists call this cognitive dissonance. Bernie called it survival. But the truth is simpler. He was a narcissist who believed his own lies. Before we continue, if you're hooked on this story, hit subscribe right now. This channel covers the biggest frauds, scams, and corporate disasters in history. The billion-dollar lies that destroyed lives. We post new videos every week now, back to Bernie Madoff. Because the question everyone asks is, how did he get away with it for so long? Madoff's decades-long fraud wasn't just a story of one man's cunning. It was also a story of regulatory failure. In 1999, a financial analyst named Harry Markopoulos started investigating Bernie Madoff. It took him 4 minutes to realize something was wrong. 4 minutes. The returns were too consistent. The strategy didn't make sense. The numbers were impossible. Harry spent the next 9 years trying to convince the SEC that Bernie was running a Ponzi scheme. He submitted detailed reports, mathematical proofs, evidence. He handed them the case on a silver platter. The SEC investigated Bernie in 1999. They found nothing. They investigated him again in 2005. Nothing. Again in 200. Nothing. Why? Because Bernie was a master manipulator. When SEC investigators showed up, Bernie would charm them, confuse them with jargon, show them fake documents. And because he was Bernie Madoff, former NASDAQ chairman, Wall Street legend, they believed him. How could the regulators not uncover this? It's inexcusable. Gross negligence and incompetence allowed Madoff to continue unchecked for years. The system that was supposed to protect investors failed, and thousands of people paid the price. Meanwhile, Bernie kept stealing. By 2008, his scheme had grown to $65 billion. But there was a problem. The 2008 financial crisis hit. The stock market crashed. Investors panicked. Everyone wanted their money back, and Bernie didn't have it. December 2008. Bernie Madoff is sitting in his office in Manhattan. He's 70 years old. He's been running this scheme for decades, and he knows it's over. Investors are demanding $7 billion in withdrawals. Bernie has less than $300 million in the bank. He can't pay them. The math doesn't work anymore. So Bernie does something shocking. He confesses. First, he tells his sons, Mark and Andrew. They both work at the firm. But they had no idea about the fraud. Bernie sits them down and says, "It's all a lie. The investment business is a giant Ponzi scheme. There's nothing left." His sons are devastated. They immediately call a lawyer. The lawyer calls the FBI. On December 11, 2008, Two FBI agents show up at Bernie's apartment. They ask him, "Is there an innocent explanation for all this?" Bernie looks at them and says, "There is no innocent explanation." He's arrested on the spot. The next day, the news breaks worldwide. Bernie Madoff, Wall Street legend, has been running a $65 billion Ponzi scheme, the largest financial fraud in history. Investors around the world panic. Charities discover their endowments are gone. Retirees realize their life savings have vanished. One investor, Thierry Magon de la Villouche, lost $1.4 billion of his clients' money. He locked himself in his office and took his own life. The devastation was unimaginable. The human cost of Madoff's crimes was staggering. Mark Madoff, Bernie's eldest son, was devastated by shame and betrayal. On December 11, 2010, exactly 2 years after his father's arrest, Mark hanged himself in his Manhattan apartment. His 2-year-old son was asleep in the next room. Andrew Madoff, Bernie's younger son, battled cancer for years. He told friends that Bernie had killed his brother quickly and was slowly killing him through grief and betrayal. Andrew died in 2014, estranged from his father. Ruth Madoff, Bernie's wife of 50 years, lost everything: her sons, her reputation, her life. Did she know about the fraud? Bernie claimed she didn't. Investigators found no evidence she was complicit. Ruth Madoff wasn't a criminal. She was tragic. A victim in her own right. Even in his final years, Madoff's letters show a man focused on managing perception rather than confronting the damage he caused. He never truly apologized to his family. He never took full responsibility. His ego wouldn't allow it. Bernie Madoff's trial was shockingly quick. He pleaded guilty to all 11 federal charges. At his sentencing hearing in June 2009, victims lined up to speak. One woman said, "He stole our money so he could live in luxury, while we lose everything." Another said, "I'm 70 years old. I have nothing left." Bernie stood up to address the court. He said, "I'm responsible for a great deal of suffering and pain. I live in a tormented state." But many victims didn't believe him. The judge sentenced Bernie Madoff to 150 years in federal prison. The maximum possible sentence. Bernie was 71 years old. He would die in prison, and he did. On April 14, 2021, Bernie Madoff died in federal prison at age 82. He served 12 years of his sentence. Bernie Madoff outlived his sons. He left a trail of victims and destroyed trust in the financial system. But by studying his life, we learn crucial lessons. Blind trust in authority can be dangerous. Unchecked ego and narcissism can lead to catastrophic decisions. Regulatory vigilance is essential to prevent future fraud. Madoff was a criminal mastermind, a narcissist, and to many, a monster. But he was also a product of a corrupt system that enabled him. Understanding him is uncomfortable but necessary, because only by learning from the past can we prevent history from repeating itself. Bernie Madoff ran the largest Ponzi scheme in history. He stole $65 billion. He destroyed thousands of lives. And he got away with it for 17 years, because nobody wanted to believe the truth. This channel covers the biggest frauds, statusverst, scams, and corporate disasters in history. If you want the full story, hit subscribe, because the next scandal is always just around the corner.